Okay, welcome back to the Wine Tech Insiders Podcast, episode 7. Today we're going to cover the disaster frost in France, non-fungible tokens, and calorie labels in the UK pubs. Here we go. Our insiders are all back, which is very exciting. Starting with Seb, who's missed a couple of episodes from Troly, Laurie from Outshinery, Nick from Wine Owners, and Jonathan from Bottlebooks.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today because she has written a few articles for Forbes about this. She's a contributor there. She's also the writer in resident for Outshinery. Jill Barth is joining us. And Jill, maybe you could provide a little bit of context of what has happened in France over the last week or so, what's going on, and then we can discuss the role that tech's played in this, or what tech can do to help.
Yeah, so in most wine growing regions around France, there's been a cold snap, really April 5th through 8th, somewhere around there, where the temperatures were cold, there was snow, there was frost. And so this isn't exactly out of the ordinary for certain parts of France in April, but what's significant is kind of the story goes back to March when there was a heat spike, temps like in the mid 20s, like mid 80s Fahrenheit, where the vines kind of started with their vegetation process. So then you've got these tender buds and frost hits. So that means that, it's big destruction for those buds that came out. So I had a chance to talk to a few growers in Burgundy, and some of them are reporting losses up to 100%, somewhere, 50, 80%, depending on where they are in the circumstances.
Did you get into what they're trying to do to mitigate this? If anything's successful, what are they using? Or
yeah, the big thing that really gets attention, because it's actually striking when you see it, is these frost candles, the bougie candles that they'll light out throughout the vineyard, and the heat from the candles is meant to warm the air around the vines, and they kind of light them. It takes, people, they're hand lit. I actually got a report, it takes 400 of these per hectare. And what's interesting is they cost somewhere between like $5 to $7 US. So you can imagine there's a cost associated. And so these candles burn and they illuminate the vineyards. It's really beautiful. Definitely Google that and take a look at the pic if you haven't seen it, because it's really pretty, but it's also really kind of eerie because it signifies a ton of work, a ton of stress all night long. There's a couple other options. They can spray the vines, which creates kind of like a little coating of ice, like an igloo, which actually, it seems counterintuitive, but that helps keep the temperature stable for the shoots. They can also use fans that kind of blow the air about. And those are the main ways, but the candles have been in full force in this particular instance, here this year.
Anybody else want to jump in on this? Has anyone else heard anything?
Yeah, I was speaking to a friend of mine in southern Burgundy yesterday, in fact, and as Jill said, exhausted after multiple nights of being up till 4 a.m, lighting the candles, trying to keep the frost off. Obviously, in most cases, unsuccessfully. I think as soon as temperatures dip down to sort of -4 or thereabouts, and then assuming that the following morning is beautiful and bright and the sun comes out, then all those buds get burned by the sun. And that's where most of the damage occurs. Interestingly, I think that those producers who are pruning really, really late are finding that is reducing the amount of damage to their vines very significantly. And indeed, late pruning, I think, could well be the new normal when it comes to global warming, because it retards everything. And if you think of areas of production like Piedmont, who have, where there are incredibly hot summers, but they don't actually matter. What matters is the temperature in September and October. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that in more traditional wine growing regions like Burgundy, very late pruning, with a goal of effectively getting through the summer with the grapes at a lesser stage of maturity, so that they can produce balanced wines through a later ripening season.
Do we have any, I'm not sure, look, I've only just seen a couple of news articles. I'm curious on the overall impact on the industry at large. Do we have any numbers of production being affected? Do we have any, is it 100% of French wine is not going to be produced this year? Or is it like, do we have any indication of what the production is going to look like?
I think it varies a lot just based on how people are managing their vineyards and also where their vineyards are. I gather, unlike the frosts of 2019, the vineyards at higher altitudes, so Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy, have been more affected than the Bourgognes, which typically, with the heavier soils that retain more moisture, you would think been the terroirs that are most affected. We know that the French government is stepping in and is going to be providing some financial help to the industry and the round. But I think the amount of production that is lost is going to be incredibly variable. I think it's impossible to say at this point.
I'm curious about making a parallel with the bushfires in California and a little bit in Australia as well. The bushfires in California in the last couple of years have been reported to have impacted or reduced the supply of USA wine by about 15 to 25%, depending on what you're reading. And I'm just curious as to whether we're going to see globally a dip like a significant enough dip in wine production in France, because we also know with the pandemic, there's also been some challenges moving craft wine. The mass-produced wines are still moving, but the craft or the smaller batch production wines are not moving as effectively. So yeah, there's an interesting sort of a story, an interesting outcome shaping up here, I think.
Yeah.
If the French are making less wine. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and I would be curious to see, like, I mean, I'm from Burgundy myself, so it is really, heartbreaking like to see and hear, of course. But I'm curious to see, like the demise, even temporary of one wine region must be the opportunity of another, right? Like, I mean, I'm French, and I can tell you, in France, you pretty much drink exclusively French wine, because for some reason we still don't believe the rest of the world can do wine. But like, I don't imagine, like, again, we don't know how much the wine production is going to be affected, but I don't imagine that the wine consumption will want to lower by French people. So just totally hypothetically, like, would that mean that French people will discover more Spanish wine or German wine? Like, like I'm like literally on a more like almost like a societal level. I'm really curious about that, because even when I say like, oh, I'm drinking a Pinot Noir from Canada, like first people stop me, Pinot Noir has to be from France. I'm like, nope, Pinot Noir is a grape varietal. Like it's just like maybe like a bit of a silver lining, like there. Curious about that.
Yeah, 100%. Look, there's no doubt that it's a complete devastation in France. It's as a vineyard owner, it would be really painful and stressful. I think at large, at the global scale of the industry, we've had an oversupply for quite a few years now. So ultimately, it might bring the prices back up and kind of rebalance the supply a bit more. I don't know. It's too early to tell.
Jonathan, what about what do we do in the wine industry, or what can we do as tech companies when there is a crisis, when a full region? I mean, is there anything we can do but just watch and pray, or I mean,
light candles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it is kind of challenging as tech, because the impacts are ultimately felt further into the future. So the damage is done today, but the financial impacts and the knock-on effects are not going to be happening for a while. And so tech is very, I think, good about being reactive, and just like we have done throughout COVID, we were able to adapt very quickly. This is a slightly different challenge, though, and but it depends on also your definition of tech, because we had also come across a post by Louis Moreau, who had some pictures of the heating cables that he has been pulling through his vineyard, and he credits this with having a chance at having his crop this year. And so it is an upfront investment that, you know, you do have to lay the cables through the field. But in moments like this, it has the potential to pay itself off many-fold, and that's a relatively low-tech solution. Just pulling a cable through the field and turning on the heater. But it seems like it was very effective for him and the other producers who've done it. So I think depends on which. It may not be people sitting at computers, but it could be good old-fashioned, industrial tech.
And I think to me that's also what's fascinating when you look at the pictures of like what at first glance looks like vineyards on fire, which is obviously not the case. Like there's something also, I don't know, for me, like very almost like primal about it. You know, it's just like, it's just like vineyards, which have been around, for obviously thousands of years. Like, not those particular one, but just as a agricultural production made by humans. And here is a fire to keep the vine warm. It's like, it's almost like, can it be more low tech than that? Like it looks like almost like, like there's something very fascinating for me, like about this as well. Like, it's just like, if you remove the surrounding, like, I mean, were the Romans doing the same thing, back then when they had frost and they had like, I'm literally like, we don't know, but I'm like, it's totally possible, right? They could have warm up fire to just not lose their grapes over 2000 years ago. Like, it's just like, that's very also fascinating to me on a more historical approach.
They started making beer.
Okay,
look, I think there's a note.
Oh, sorry.
A note on global climate change, right? And we're seeing an increasing number of frost events like this. We're seeing bushfires coming up on a more regular, more devastating kind of a basis, and we're also seeing a lot of new wine region, right? As much as I love a good French bottle. Also, we are seeing a lot of colder climates now producing wines more and more and more. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, Outshinery is honestly seeing it firsthand. Like, literally, like this morning, I mean, the day just started, but we just sent bottle images from the UK. A rosé and 4 whites. Just like, I don't know where quite yet in the UK, but it's just like that's. There's some so new and recent, like new wineries that call the climate wine. It's fascinating. It's moving up. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to non-fungible tokens and wine. Non-fungible tokens. Now, non-fungible tokens is a way to basically create ownership and sort of certification to clarify who owns a digital asset. This is based on blockchain technology, which is how Bitcoin works. So what happened was a few weeks ago, this really came into the news because the artist BP sold a collage work for 69 million, a digital, basically artwork. It doesn't exist outside of a computer, it exists in the digital world. And this created a lot of waves. A New York Times reporter then sold an article that he had written and published for $800,000 US dollars. And there's even a company called Top Shot who sells sports moments and has already had 500 million in sales. And just this week, in fact, yesterday, Yao Vineyards from Yao Ming fame, NBA basketball player and in California, just started an auction with non-fungible tokens. I'm going to go to Laurie on this one, queen of digital images, and hopefully, what do you think? Is this a fad? What's going on here? Enlighten us.
I mean, as much as I can, NFTs are just really they are fascinating. Like it's just this is like embracing, yeah, is it in English word? Embracing of like digital to the next level, like not even having like a physical anything, but like owning it for millions of dollars. For like, I think to me it's more of a like a status symbol, like a really like a collecting items, and probably a bit of ego as well. And from what I've been reading and learning about it is a lot of like potential like investment. Like it was bought, like some of the pieces are bought by funds, like investment fund in Dubai. And it's just like, so it's not like a lot of art pieces, like sometimes not so much about the art itself, like the value, like, but the value of the art, like what it means in a portfolio of other assets. I'm really curious about the Yao Ming winery, however, because they're doing things a little bit differently. I still think there is, of course, like a marketing ploy, but the fact that there's a physical product in that case, like it can be, from my understanding, it can be shipped to your door, if you buy that bottle, or, the winery can keep it for you in the right conditions. So there's like this part that I think is just like very interesting. Just like kind of like hopefully, like not hopefully, but just like opening the discussion to new, like, I don't know if you're a wine consumer, but like just like the idea of like, more people can be talking about wine in a totally different way that was never been done before, because you talk about spot moment, you talk about like New York Times columns, and then, like the wine industry also does that. And it seems a bit better placed than some more heavily marketed ploy. Like I think Pringles did something, like, like chips. So like this just looks, okay, like you're really trying to hook yourself on like the fad of the moment, like the trend of the moment. Is it here to stay? I have personally a bit my doubt. I also have my issues. We were talking earlier about like climate change and the issues of it. And actually, it's a well-known fact that often is not advertised, but anything cryptocurrency is extremely environmentally heavy. Like it takes a lot of computer power to mine those tokens. So I think they can be a bit like, to me, like that's the biggest irony with, for example, Elon Musk getting so much Bitcoin. He's like, oh, I'm here to, like electric car and save the planet. And I can't remember how many Bitcoins. It's like, so how do you justify that in your head? Like, like it just was not touched about. So I'm curious about the wine industry, but I would say it's still very, very niche. Like I think it could be an interesting new marketing play. That's my take.
100% hype. That's what I say.
Ultimately,
really look, from my perspective, just to chime in on that, there is a really good application of a crypto style chain in the world of wine. However, Bitcoin is still not a device or a device with which you can buy a coffee readily anywhere you go. Right, so it still has not completely disrupted the entire financial world, let alone a fairly traditional industry, which is wine. Right, so while there is a really good application of the technology, it's not proven that it will make any sort of a change in the overall world of wine. This being said, the NFTs were actually orientated or crafted really towards digital goods, right? So Twitter's founder, Jack Dorsey, sold his first tweet. Now, I have a copy of that first tweet in ones and zeros on my machine, and it cannot be differentiated from the original, right? Now, how does this apply to the real life world of wine? Okay, yeah, there might be a little bit of wine fraud going around. But really, it's just a marketing wise, I can just kind of say I bought an NFT and I own this NFT, and it kind of comes attached with some wine behind it. Right? We're not about to change the way that wine is being sold through NFT. No way, in no way, shape, or form at all.
Jonathan or Nick, are you a bit more optimistic about this? Are you going to rush out and bid on something with your Ethereum or your Bitcoins?
Well, I mean, I think it is the NFTs could have a place, but I think you have to look at the product characteristics of whether they're what value they ultimately do, or whether it's a actual value versus a fad. I mean, you need a product that is quite exclusive, that has a certain minimum value, and probably also a certain life expectancy. I mean, even if you had a really premium bottle of wine and you're going to drink it tomorrow, do you really need to spend the money on an NFT? Probably not. So I think it depends on what your objective is whatever you're buying and what you're wanting to prove ownership of. So, you know, if I buy a €5 bottle of Plunk, it's maybe something I don't want other people to know that I own. So I would actually actively avoid any sort of wines powered by NFT. So it really does. I think it depends on your use case.
And the key here with NFT specifically, not crypto at large, the key with NFTs is duplication, right? You're effectively proving that you own the original, you own the one thing. You're the rights owner to a digital piece of art that can be copied 25 million times in a click. Wine, okay, yes, can be duplicated. Yeah, okay, we've seen some instances of fraud, but it's also much, much, much harder. And if you want to prove ownership, we have this thing called a buyer contract. I bought this wine from you, so I own it, right?
Well, I think that's where blockchain comes in. You know, there's an established use case around chains of distribution. We know that you know, high volume wine distribution is important in terms of its tracking, its temperature, its ability to be copied at huge volume, where the ultimate consumer has absolutely no idea whether the wine in the bottle is South American or Southern French, and probably actually doesn't care. But food standards care, producers care. The logistics companies care. Sorry?
Right. Well, this is not talking about NFTs.
No.
This is the crypto chain. This is literally a blockchain for wine. And look, if we look it up, right, I can name easily a dozen different blockchains which are today publicly available that are effectively tracking, what they call it, provenance tracking. So to really know which winemaker actually made the wine, which winery actually sold the wine, which supplier did what to the wine, where was it moved, where did it go, to actually prove to the buyer, the ultimate buyer, the exact provenance. That's one really actual use case for wine. But NFTs is a digital asset that just can just be copied left, right, and center. It's a total hype. But this being said, look, I'm a total advocate for digital currencies in a world of wine. Absolutely, I do think it'll come. I do think it'll come from a provenance tracking perspective.
Yeah. Exactly.
We've got extensive research that we've done on that specifically, and there is going to be in the future a way to really track everything. I just don't think it's NFTs, and I don't think it's going to be today in the case of wine. That's the biggest challenge.
Okay, in the UK, the government is considering legislation, they're trying to pass legislation that will require pubs to declare calorie counts of beers and wine and spirits. And the pubs are pissed. Jonathan, what have you heard about this? As if I called Laurie the queen of digital images, you're the king of product information. What are you hearing about this at Bottlebooks?
Oh, it is a huge frustration. It is something that to some extent has been long anticipated, but I think a lot of people also thought this was still many years coming, or is still not coming for a while. At the most basic level, it's a rather simple equation that you can calculate to like what the calorie is based on the alcohol and the sugar, and that's enough to meet most people's expectations. But then comes the follow-on about how do you get this information disseminated? Who's going to do the calculations? Then about how do you get the information on your menus in the restaurant? Do you need to reprint all the menus? And it has, so from what's a relatively simple number, the knock-on effects can be quite huge.
Nick, are you hearing anything in the UK?
Not really. I mean, I think my view on this is quite basic, really, which is, so alcohol has calories, and sugar is fattening, and people who drink a lot will put on weight. I mean, just drink water if you're bothered.
I think there's definitely a question around health, right? And I remember a discussion a couple of years ago with Rob Macmillan, one of his yearly sort of state of the industry discussions. And he basically reiterated a couple of times that the wine industry, generally speaking, is quite bad at promoting wine as being a relatively healthy consumption, healthy drink, right? Yes, there is a bit of antioxidants. Yes, if you get smashed, it's not going to be so good. Now, the question with that new change in rules is that going to have an impact on how the general public is perceiving the drinks, right? We know if you drink 10 pints, it's probably not really good for you. But who's going to turn around and say, actually, 1 pint a day is absolutely fine? 1 glass of wine a day is absolutely fine. And I think overall, I'm not sure about the pubs and the restaurants, but I know the wine industry is doing a very poor job at turning around and really reinforcing that. I mean, kombucha just took off in the last 5-10 years in ways that was completely underestimated.
Which is full of sugar, and most of it's full of sugar, right?
There is. I mean, it's consumed, right? But the whole idea is that wine should be doing that as well. Wine is losing steam, right? You're now seeing canned cocktails. You're now seeing different mix at home kind of drinks. Wine should be pushing really hard on the overall, I wouldn't say the health benefits, but the fact that it's a natural drink. It's untransformed in most cases. So yeah, I'm curious on the pubs front as to whether it's a labeling and data challenge, or whether the pub owners would turn around and say, well, if all of my clients knew how much calories they're drinking, maybe they're going to start drinking far less, right? I don't know what's the biggest gripe around it.
Yeah, and also like it goes back and how well can the general audience, and I include myself in it, can read that information and make an interpretation of it. Like, I don't know. And then you always have this debunking as well. There's just like, oh, actually calories don't matter, right? Like it's not this. So it's like, like it's just like, I'm all about, of course, like nutritional information and everything, like in concept. I think it sounds great. Like I want to know what I'm drinking, but do I really believe like 2% of my intake, or just like sometimes I drink like like orange juice or something, and like, oh my god, I'm doing 120% of my vitamin C. Is that bad? Like there's just also like this kind of like like everything with information is like having the information and being able to interpret it the right way, related, especially when it's as personal as your body, your woman versus men. Like there's so many like it's just like that's the interesting part as well for me. But you have to start somewhere, and then just as a designer, you have to cram even more things on the back label. Like it's just like on a purely like design standpoint, it's just like, damn it.
Well, thanks, insiders. That was another episode of the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. I want to thank our special guest, Jill from Oushinery, for enlightening us about what's going on in France. Laurie from Outshinery also, thank you so much. Nick from Wine Owners, Jonathan from Bottlebooks, and Seb from Troly. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, David.
See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.